Stef Sifandos, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah, Sifandos or Sifandos, but how you said there was fine, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show, man.
Cool, bro. Yeah, I'm just honored to be here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, you're in Indonesia right now, you said, right?
Yes,
Bali,
yes.
with all the other Westerners.
There's many expats here, yeah.
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 It's pretty. We kind of taken over that place. I've never been, but everyone's like, I'm in Bali. I'm going to Bali.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you do? I'm an entrepreneur. Okay, great. Like everyone else in Bali.
Pretty much, yeah, yeah.
Pretty much the biggest drivers of the economy. I'm suspecting in Bali.
Oh, yeah, tourism for sure, and people that spend months on end here as well. I mean, I don't spend months on end here because I live so close. I come in and I come out because I work with another organisation here, and then what I usually do is there's a couple of businesses that I have here as well, so it's just convenient to remain here for sometimes 2-3 weeks of the month, or 2-3-4 weeks every 2 months, something along those lines. It just depends, yeah.
What are the other businesses that you have there?
So they're not really based here. It's just that so much of our team is based here, so it makes sense to come here often. Yeah, so one of the businesses, I'll send you a link. One of the businesses that we've got that we're in the process of launching is called highvibe.network. And actually, that's the website, highvibe, HIGH, vibe, VIBE.network. And there are various platforms that offshoot from that. And if you jump online, you'll have a look. But there's some of our team that is based here. Our team's scattered all over the world, actually, like Taipei, US, Hong Kong, Sydney, Perth. We're all over the place. But essentially what we are is we are a platform for various platforms to launch from. So what the major platform that we're working with is, or working to present to the market, is called iDevelopMyself.com. And essentially that's like what we call the Netflix of personal development. So it's a monthly membership based platform where the individual user will come on and they will have access to coaches and authors and a variety of education across various modalities. So love and relationships, entrepreneurship, growth and mindset, psychology, health and wellness. And they are able to access a number of mini courses, and there's various tiers to these courses. Some are lengthened, some are live courses, some are video courses. So there's a curation there that's taking place at the moment. We're developing all of this now. But all of this, what makes this all unique is that it resides in the blockchain. So we're integrating cryptocurrency into this and blockchain technology as well. So we're developing our own high vibe coin, and that's being mined at the moment. So there's a lot more to this than just a sort of standard business model. We're integrating converging tech into this to make it so there's gamification as well. So essentially, as a user, you'll be paid to complete a course or paid to complete an education platform, and it's all based on a common interest model, not a self-interest model. So it's really quite unique. It's quite interesting what we're doing.
Yeah, that sounds very unique.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of like mining. While you take courses, you're effectively mining
to some degree, and it's the systems and the algorithms and all the back end. And that's not my department, man. I'm not a tech guy, so I can't explain that to you accurately.
Neither am I, man. It's
yeah,
way over my head.
I get the gist of it, yeah. But we've got algorithmic specialists and mathematicians involved in this, in setting the coin structure up and the back end and all of that and how it actually work. But we'll do an initial raise I'm looking at the date, less than 20 days. We aim to raise 13.6 million US, and then we'll do an ICO, which is an initial coin offering, in August. So my role in this is one, because I know the founder of this. He's a good friend of mine. He's a close friend of mine. He brought me on board because we're friends and sort of, we just distribute, the ethos is a common interest model. So we're distributing the abundance, so to speak, but also my role is curation of content in this platform, but also I'm overseeing a number of different other operations within. There's like about 9 platforms that we have. So essentially money talks. Like if you have a strong base of funds, of pool of funds, you can create multiple business models. So there's like, one of them is like, one of the models is high vibe news. So we're going to have a news channel, but it's only going to be positive news stories.
Oh, yeah, we need more of that stuff instead of
absolutely.
all the negative stuff. Look how horrible the world is.
Yeah.
Look at my perspective on how horrible the world is and how terrible these people are. Oh yeah? Look at how horrible you are. Like just that all that junk.
Yeah. So there's the number of different platforms that are coming from the High Vibe network. When you jump on the website, you'll have a look. I probably didn't explain High Vibe too well, but I almost purposely do that as well, because I prefer people to jump on the website, which is still, it's about 99% complete. There's a few tweaks that need to be made, but the gist of it is all there. We're completing the white paper at the moment to explain in great detail. That's pretty much, again, completed. We just need to aesthetically produce it. And once that's done, we've already started approaching investors as well. So the I Develop Myself platform is almost the marquee platform. And we've got links and contacts in some really great authors as well, and really great program providers and course providers too. So that's going to be quite exciting.
Amazing. So so you've got a few things on the go then. So you've got that, and then what's your brand? It's just stefsifandos.com.
Yeah, that's it. That's my brand, and that's my to be honest, that's my primary focus. I mean, although the High Vibe is definitely it's probably a parallel focus, but for me, stefsifandos.com is my focus, is my business, is my service, and it's all about, again, relational alchemy. And I have various programs. Again, I have what I call like a life program, or a general program, which I call Chaos to Clarity. And that is for anyone just wishing to literally gain clarity in their life and cultivate tools and be exposed to different exercises and habits and patterns and behaviors that can actually change or transform and impact their lives in a positive way. And then I have very specific programs on a program on conscious relating, so how to cultivate and build and create healthy relationships, intimate relationships, romantic intimate relationships. And then there's a specific men's program that I have available, which is called the Conscious Warrior, and an offshoot of that is also a 3-month immersive Reclaim Your Kingdom program, where we meet every week as men online, and we delve into the 12 principles of the Conscious Warrior, and there's a number of different other things that occur with that as well. And then I've got a female-only program too, but I haven't released that yet. That won't be released for another few months. So I've got 3 main programs that I focus on: Conscious Warrior, or 4: Conscious Warrior, Reclaim Your Kingdom, Conscious Relating, and Chaos to Clarity. And then I speak as well. So I'm speaking at an event in Costa Rica in June. I'm speaking in Europe as well. I run workshops, like I'm running a 5-day personal growth retreat in the mountains in New Zealand, in the New Zealand Alps, in April. So I do. So basically, I run
fun.
2 5. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. It's a beautiful place, Franz Josef Glacier. So I run 2, 5, 7, and 9-day retreats, or immersive experience. I call them immersive experiences. So yeah, that's essentially my business, and then I also run those workshops around Australia and hopefully New Zealand, US soon as well. So I'm talking with a couple of gentlemen that are in the masculine space, for lack of a better term, healthy masculine space, teaching men how to be healthy men. And that's what the Conscious Warrior model is all about.
Amazing.
Is cultivate conscious men in this world. Yeah.
Well, I've got a few contacts that I'd be able to put you in touch with out here, so we can we can talk about that offline. So you mentioned relationship alchemy, and that's one thing that I really wanted to talk to you about, because like we were mentioning in our conversation beforehand, that when I see relationship alchemy, I was imagining that alchemy has to do with, well, actually, you know what? Like, you go ahead. You define what alchemy is. I mean, I've read The Alchemist, and so like several times. It's an incredible book. And so I've got my own idea of what alchemy is. Plus, I've dabbled with sex magic, which is a lot. It has a lot to do with alchemy. So I'm curious how you define alchemy, and then what relationship alchemy is, and how you teach it.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very, very simple for me. Alchemy is simply taking something as it is and transforming it into something else. That's it. So the only reason you'd want to do that is if A, what you're experiencing now, the relationship, the subject, the object, whatever it may be, is no longer serving you, or it's unhealthy, or it's toxic, or you simply want to experience something new. So you then need to approach that, whether it's that experience or that relationship or that person or that passion, whatever it is that is in your life, you have to approach that from a different vantage point and engage in it with a different perspective. And in order to do that, you have to, you mentioned depth psychology earlier. You have to explore the wholeness and the fullness of that situation, but also yourself in relation to that. So how we do that, and there are various tools and exercises, of course, is going to define how we then transform ourselves in relation to that experience, and how we transform, or how we, when we say transform the experience, essentially we're altering our vantage point or perspective.
No, I like that. You're saying how you view yourself in relation to, like, say, an external circumstance or experience.
Yeah.
And I think some people, and I've caught myself doing this in my earlier years, that it's 100% me. Everything is all my responsibility, and I've seen people sort of go that route before, and that's not necessarily the case, because the external world does happen to you in the same way that you relate with the external world. But I guess people with a victim mentality think that the world is only happening to them, or they think the exterior world should happen in a specific way. So I like how you mention it's yourself in relation to, because that doesn't negate that the external world is happening, but it also doesn't absolve you and your responsibility from your own perspective of yourself and the world and everything that's going on around you. So I really like that combination from that. Even just that one word, I really like that.
Yeah, it's a co-collaboration with our reality and environment. It's a co-creation with our environment and ourselves. And, without getting too deep into quantum physics or even Eastern mysticism, how we currently perceive, we have to begin where we are, and how we currently perceive the world is through our own senses, through our own subjectivity. And yes, we are imprinting on our environment our subjectivity, but our environment is also feeding into us. There's a feedback loop, there's a continuous loop that is occurring. So irrespective of whether the environment is us or we are the environment, as we stand in our current state of collective consciousness, there is ourselves that we have this dialogue with, or this relationship with, in our inner being, whether it be here in the mind or the mind is here, wherever the mind is. That's probably not too relevant. And we also observe our physical surroundings. So if we begin from that point, that I feel it's a strong launching pad for transformation, if that's what we desire. So, and essentially, to simplify what I said earlier, it's taking a non-desired state of being and transforming, alchemizing it into a desired state of being. That's it.
Well, that sounds really simple.
Yeah. The journey isn't always as simple. Right?
Yeah. It's always the simplest things are always the hardest, right?
Yeah. They just require time. They require, I have a triad of attainment and embodiment, and that triad is very simple. It's practice, patience, persistence. And if you employ consciously and with intent, deliberate intent, and pay attention to yourself along the journey, you'll embody or achieve or attain whatever it is that you wish through practice, persistence, and patience.
So how does that relate to relationships? How do you go from that non-desired state and then take it into the desired state. The desired state of
whatever that may be, which is subjective for most people. But I mean, most people, it's fairly clear. You want to experience bliss and joy and connection and sharing and vulnerability and openness. I mean, most people that are healthy, that don't have any form of pathology, are going to say, they're the type of relationships that I'm going to want. They're the type of intimate relationships that I'm going to want. How do we do that? Using that triad of attainment and embodiment is really quite simple. You first identify what it is you wish to experience in the relationship. Identify what you want in the relationship, what's going to serve you, and the only way to identify that is to really understand your values as an individual, your personal values as an individual, and also understand your purpose or purposes. And, why you're here, why you're here on this earth, why are you experiencing consciousness? Why do you have an awareness of self? What does this reality mean? And these are huge existential, spiritual, and esoteric questions, massive. And they don't necessarily require an answer, but they require attention. It's imperative that we pay attention to these questions, because they will begin to shape and define our path. Because the quality of the questions we ask ourselves in life will determine the quality of the life that we live, and how we live that life as well. And there's a simple wisdom, really simple wisdom. So paying attention to the questions that we're asking ourselves. But coming back to your original question around how does that triad of attainment and embodiment serve intimate or romantic relationships? Well, once you identify what you want in a relationship and who you wish to be in a relationship and what you need or what you feel you need from your partner, from your beloved, you then practice that. And you practice it diligently. Because most of the practice is undoing old habits and neural patterns and psycho-emotional behavioral patterns that no longer serve us or that no longer align with the practice that you now desire. So that practice, for example, could be every morning when I wake up, I wish to spend 5 to 10 to 15 minutes with my partner, just eye gazing or being in silence, like conscious silence, or meditating together, or embracing and hugging each other, to really set the tone for our relationship and for the day. And it is an ongoing process. You have to practice that, number one. Now, to practice effectively, you have to be persistent, because life happens. Maybe you have children, maybe you don't. Maybe you have jobs, maybe you have other commitments, maybe you have other responsibilities. So you have to be persistent in the practice. And the patience, well, we all require patience, because patience truly is a virtue. Because when you share intimacy, stuff comes up. You spoke about depth psychology or evolutionary psychology even as well. Stuff comes up. Old stuff comes up. Implicitly, explicitly, we begin to understand ourselves very differently when we share intimate space. And in silence and stillness and in space in particular, when we create that, much is revealed to us in terms of truth and wisdom and information, knowledge that comes through. And dealing with that can sometimes be overwhelming. So we require the patience to sit with that, to be with that, to also be kind and compassionate, empathetic and caring during that process, not only towards our beloved, but also for ourselves and towards who we are as well. So that becomes deeply important with respect to how we wish to embrace this new version, this new way of being. Practice, patience, persistence.
Yeah, you were mentioning the patterns and things like getting rid of patterns that don't necessarily serve us. I mean, we learn certain ways of behaving to stay safe, generally when we're younger. Correct. So if we, our first boyfriend or our first girlfriend in high school would get really upset if you provided any feedback or asked for anything or any kind of support. If every time you asked for support, you got told that you were an idiot or a loser, then you're gonna learn to be ashamed of needing help, and then you're gonna be ashamed to ask for it, which is a behavior that may have served you in that moment, but then you end up learning that behavior and you carry that behavior with you in the future into your adult relationship. So even at the age of 30, you'll still be carrying that because you'll think that that's the way that things have to be. And although that pattern may have served you before, it doesn't serve you now as a fully functioning adult who has been able to make different decisions. So it's being able to recognize that. And you had also mentioned the who you want to be in relationship. I don't think a lot of people ask that question. I think we're really good at asking the question, well, what kind of partner do I want? Which I think is not necessarily a high quality question. It's like, okay, well, what kind of partner do you want? Okay, well, how do you want to feel in relationship? I think that's another layer down. And then what you asked was a whole other layer down. Like, how do I want to be in relationship? How do I want to make my partner feel? That's really powerful.
It is, and so what do I want from a relationship is a first stage developmental question in terms of being in an intimate relationship, and it's a highly selfish, self-absorbed question. It's not bad or good. It's just deeply self-absorbed. Whereas, who do I wish to be in relationship is that question's quite loaded. It's not just who do I wish to be in relationship for myself and my own growth, but who do I wish to be in relationship for my beloved or my partner or the person that I'm with and I'm sharing intimate space with. But who do I also wish to be in relationship with respect to how the world observes me and how the world views me, and then how I function in the world and how I can be of service in the world. So any intimate relationship, or any relationship for that matter, ultimately, when I say ultimately, I don't mean that in absolute language, but in an ever-evolving space, it should serve, or it could serve, our ability to function in the world and be of service to the world, to be of service to something greater than ourselves. And that could be, when I say the world, I'm not necessarily referring to having to be the Secretary General of the United States, of the United Nations, or the President of the United States, or some leader that leads millions or billions of people. It could be simply that you are the leader, or you are of service to your family unit, your partner and your children and your extended family or your community. That's not too relevant. What's important is that we are asking questions. How does this relationship serve me? And how does it serve? And how do I serve the relationship in order for me to grow, for my partner to grow, and for us to contribute wholly and deeply to society, or to be of service to humanity or to the world, and so forth. And those questions are deeply profound questions, and they can be very confronting, because they can bring up a great deal of fear within us, because with that fear comes responsibility, comes an opportunity to now be more accountable, not only to ourselves, but to others. And that can be, again, depending on our own conditioning, our own primal conditioning, or our own conditioning as young people growing up. It can be very confronting and too painful to address. And that's one of the reasons why most relationships suffer. Either they remain together and they suffer, or they suffer and they end, because they remain in the realm of superficiality for too long. And let me just define superficiality. It's not just aesthetic appearance, or it's not just, hey, how is the weather today? It's far more than that. Superficiality is an integral part of any relationship. Our problem is that we remain in that space for too long when we're in intimate relationship. And what I mean by that is that we do not go deep within self. We do not explore the shadow. Therefore, we do not explore the wholeness of who we are, because it's an intricate part of our being. And therefore, we walk around and we move in that relationship in fracture and fragmentation. And you've got two people walking around or interrelating or connecting in a fractured, fragmented way. It's not going to end up well.
That's a really interesting visual. I was actually just starting to write that down, because I wasn't too sure how far you were going to go down that path there. And I wanted to remember that. That's a really interesting visual of two fragmented people not fully relating, because they haven't truly they haven't truly looked at themselves. They're only looking at trying to figure out what it is that they're going to get out of something, which is,
yes,
in a lot of ways, I mean, you get a lot. I'm going to restructure that sentence. One thing that people who are depressed can do to get themselves out of depression, they can go and volunteer. There's a huge reward for everyone. That's our highest calling, is to help others. And when we go and help others, and when we go and volunteer, we do just naturally feel better. So when people are depressed, if they go out and volunteer, they naturally start to feel a lot better about themselves and things that are going on. So I think that having that mindset of what can I get out of a relationship can keep us in that sort of state of constantly looking for something that we can get, rather than saying, oh, what can I give in there? And then that process of giving then will naturally start to get more out of things. And that's kind of what life is too. Life is constantly giving. Life gives. That's what life is. Death is an ending. It's taking away. So I guess I'm looking at it sort of philosophically there, but also pragmatically is like, how can you add into relationships, and the more you can add into your relationship, the more you're going to get out of it.
Well, giving is something that is neurologically, for lack of a better term, hardwired within us.
Mm-hmm.
Like to be of service is something that is hardwired within us. When we start, remember that quality questions, quality life. We start asking, how can we serve and how can we be? And again, the intention of service has to come from a very well aligned place. If it's coming from a place of toxicity or coming from a place of pain and fear, then our service or our giving can be skewed, and it becomes biased in the terms of how it's given and also how it's received and why. The why is very important, because it allows us to transmute and move beyond any debilitating fear states or unconscious fear states or unconscious limiting belief systems that drive our behavior. So there are layers within layers there as well. And it's not about, it will be very clear here, it's not about reaching or even embodying this perfect state of being. It's very far from that. It's a journey. So being in that journey and being open to the learning and the teaching that unfolds in that journey, and the knowledge that arises to then be assimilated within and then applied externally, which becomes wisdom. That's what our purpose is, for example, with respect to how we choose to move through the world. And if we can embody that and embrace that and be in this consistent state of openness towards life, towards what we are experiencing, towards our own inner paradigm, our own thoughts, our emotions, our feelings, our models of reality, the constructs that we create about the world around us, and also how we relate to the world, we will be in a perpetual state of growth. And that's really probably the primary function of every human being, or every sentient, every conscious, every living being, is growth. You only need to look out your window if you're not in a concrete jungle, but you look out your window and you look at nature, and you look at what nature does. It strives for homeostasis and symbiosis. It thrives in that space, and it thrives to grow. We're the same. We grow a little bit differently. Oh, not really. We grow in height and physical stature, but we also grow in terms of the expansion of our ideas and our beliefs and our models and constructs of reality. And how you were a very different, not very, but you were a different person to who you were a day ago, a week ago, a month ago, 10 years ago. Like imagine think about this for a moment. How did you view the world? And just choose one area. I mean, how did you relate to your parents, or how did you relate to your friends or women or politics 10 years ago as opposed to now? It'd be different. Probably
night and day for me,
different. Yeah. For those that are on a journey of being open to exploring themselves, it is night and day. The contrast is immense. For those that are unaware of that, they're ignorant in that space. Again, ignorance isn't, it may carry a negative connotation, but ignorance is simply lacking awareness. There's no judgment to that. I'm ignorant in certain areas of my life. At times, not consistently or always, but there are times when I'm ignorant because maybe I just don't know, or I'm caught up in something else, or my mindscape is occupied elsewhere, or I'm experiencing stress and pressure and so forth. So I become ignorant in certain expressions of my life, and I'm open to that, and I'm open to learning and growing from that, and open and learning to how can I maintain a level of as much awareness as possible to limit the negative impact of what I'm experiencing, if I'm experiencing stress or pressure, but also how do I just move into a space of acceptance as well, and a space of self-care and self-kindness and self-compassion whilst I'm experiencing stress and pressure. So, ignorance is healthy. Ignorance, if we're aware of our ignorance and we choose to grow from our ignorance, if we're stuck in a perpetual state of unconscious ignorance,
or deliberate ignorance, where we choose to be ignorant.
Deliberate ignorance, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And we choose to be ignorant because being wise or being aware is too difficult, so we become lazy. And laziness is just a byproduct of us not recognizing that something is important to us. We don't value it enough. It's just that it's not part of our hierarchy of values or a priority of values, so we don't pay any attention to it. Like it's this is a priority for me. So for me, speaking my truth, connecting with wonderful and amazing human beings from, fuck man, like we are, 15,000 kilometers away from each other. I don't even know how far away from we are from each other. I made this a priority. So like when I went on the, like yesterday we were messaging and said, hey man, can you move it an hour early? And you said, I'm fortunate, whatever you had scheduled. And
I wasn't even in the city, so I just got back
there you
half
go.
an hour before.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go. Like for me, it was like, well, okay, I'm going to shift that because this is important. So it's in my, I didn't want to wait till next week because I'm excited to connect with you now because I can. It's just that it was a timetable. It's a very simple example that I'm giving, but it's a priority for me. So there's no laziness around it. There's no, oh, do I do this? I'm here. If it was convenient, then great. If not, then no big deal. But it's so important that we look at our lives and language is really important. And how we interpret language is super, super important as well because it's loaded with symbolism and meaning. Language is loaded with symbolism and meaning. And depending on our cultural upbringing, depending on what we've been exposed to as young people, we will interpret one word very differently from someone else.
Do you have a background in NLP?
I do, yeah.
Okay. I figured that's probably where that was coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a background myself, and I truly value language, and I've just finished writing an article, well, 2 articles oriented around language and how we develop our perception of the world around us, and then how our language plays into that. And then I find that as I keep on going, as I keep writing, and then it's like a whole other offshoot comes off. They're like, God, there's this here that I got to talk about too. So I completely understand what you're saying about language. It really, really is powerful. I mean, one person can say dog, and that's not even really that important of a word. We all imagine a 4-legged creature that barks and can drool, and chases cats. But some people instantly have an emotional reaction of fear. Some people will have a heartfelt emotion of cuddles. Yeah. Some people will imagine food. Other people will imagine disgust of like a mangy street animal. Yeah. Some people will feel just complete cold.
Yeah.
Feelings like just literally feeling absolutely nothing towards the creature. So one word can hold a plethora of different emotional experiences behind it. And that's just the word dog. That's not even necessarily the word respect or love or relationship or sex or appreciation. Those words have much more meaning behind them and much more different. They've got a lot of different ways of looking at them, basically.
Yeah, there's greater depth and variance to the interpretation of that word. You can go down so many different tangents or rabbit holes, with a word such as appreciation or intimacy or love, or sharing or connection or marriage. Like it's huge, well, massive words for how we live our life. I don't have the aesthetic version of it, but I can share it with you now. But I just recently created I looked at our lives and I looked at, this is very relevant, especially with the language component. I looked at our lives and I looked at, okay, so we experience life. So I call this experiential outcomes, how we live our lives, right? How we essentially experience life. And I thought, well, what is life an experience of? Like how do we get to this point of life, right? Because that's interesting. How do we get to this point of life? Like, is it our choices? Okay, yeah, well, it is. It's our choices. Okay, so let's go deeper into our choices. Okay, so it's our choices. So I looked at experiential outcomes in our lives. Then I looked at choices and behavior. So our choices and our behaviors influence the choices that we make, and the behavior that we exhibit in that moment influences how we experience life, right? So what influences our choices and behaviors? Our state of awareness in that moment. what we are conscious to, what we are experiencing. I thought, well, okay, so what influences our state of awareness? Language, thoughts, emotions, both conscious and unconscious, and the construct of language, the cultural construct of language as well, and how we relate to it. I thought, okay, well, what influences this? Thoughts and emotions and language and so forth. Then I thought, well, it must be our models of reality, our belief systems, our social constructs of the world around us and within us. I thought, okay, well, what influences our belief systems? Unconscious feelings. Okay, so what influences or what impacts or what lends us to experiencing unconscious feelings? And that was environmental reinforcement. Okay, so there needed to be something else there. So go back to environmental reinforcement, the enteric interpretation of the world around us. So we primarily learn and we cultivate an awareness of the world or our belief systems or how we view the world through our digestive system. And it sends a heap of information to our brain through the vagus nerve. But there are neurons in our digestive systems, but through our nervous system, we basically feel the world around us. We experience the world around us. And then I thought, okay, well, then there's a visceral interaction with the world. And then that is based on the topology of our environment. So the topology of our environment is basically our physical environment. You know, what we are exposed to, what we feel. Did we have a healthy upbringing? Did we have an unhealthy upbringing? Did we have any positive reinforcement, emotional reinforcement, and so forth growing up as a child? Did we have access to resources? And then we go back up again. So this is the bottom of the pyramid. It's a pyramid that I've created. The bottom of the pyramid is our physical environment. Now, physical environment then allows an opportunity for visceral interaction with that environment to take place naturally, because we are now in the physical environment. We were born, per se. And then we have an enteric interpretation of that environment. Then there's environmental reinforcement that will occur primarily through our primary caregivers with respect to what we are experiencing. That will either reinforce what we are experiencing, or they will reinforce that what we are experiencing or feeling is inaccurate, so to speak. Yeah. So if we're experiencing fear and we are soothed in that, then we can say, okay, maybe we do not need to experience fear right now. But if we're experiencing deep fear and that's reinforced by our environment, whether it be objectively or subjectively, then that becomes more of a part of us. And we cultivate unconscious feelings around the self, around life, around that particular circumstance or set of experiences. That then lends itself to our belief systems, our models of reality. Our models of reality form the language that we use and how we use the language and how we relate to the language. But also it forms our conscious and unconscious thoughts and emotions. That then lends itself to our state of awareness at any given moment. That state of awareness influences our choices and behavior, and our choices and behavior bring us to what we experience in life.
Man, that's pretty much exactly the article that I was writing. That's like
that's epic. So good.
Same plane, man. Same level. You're in my head.
I love that.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, it's so, like, this stuff is so incredibly powerful. And when we get that awareness of, like, holy shit, all of these things that are going on, my language, my belief systems, my paradigms, where those things are coming from, as well as my external environment, my choices of how to react, the multitude of emotions that come up as well. Like if I'm patience being the virtue that it is, if my instant reaction to something is anger, if I wait and I don't necessarily react, but I allow myself some time and be patient, then another emotion might come up, which might be humiliation or sadness or fear or discomfort or disgust. And then if I wait a little bit longer, there might be a few more emotions that come up. And then I have the ability to respond because I have a much deeper awareness of what my experience is of that, as well as a deeper awareness of my belief system of the world, why I responded the way that I did, and I can make a choice of how I want to be in that situation with that person. All of this stuff, it's so incredibly powerful. And it's, yeah, I'm with you, man. Like, yes. I'd love to see that how you put that together, because I've got my own perspective of how it all works, but I mean, you know, I didn't get to where I am now by figuring it out all on my own. I like to learn from other people. Expands my perspective.
Likewise,
right?
my friend. Yeah, likewise. We, you know, whatever we create is sure unique to the way we view the world, but ultimately it's a byproduct of us standing on the shoulders of giants. I think it was who was it that said that? Was it Copernicus or was it
Dr. Seuss?
It wasn't Dr. Seuss.
I don't think it was Dr. Seuss.
Essentially, could have been. Dr. Seuss is quite a wise character. Anyway, that's the reality, though. We learn from each other and we grow together. That's
essentially
that's the way it is. Yeah.
Yeah, we're an amalgamation of all the lessons that we learned from those before us.
Yeah, basically. And an amalgamation of all the wisdom before us as well.
Yeah, exactly. As a short aside before I move on here, someone had said to me, and I don't quite remember who said this, but intelligent people learn from their mistakes, wise people learn from the mistakes of others. And I really liked that quote. And it actually made me shift a lot because I wasn't necessarily asking for help and getting coaching at the time. I was getting very little coaching. This was years ago. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, damn it. That's a good point. I can spend all this time trying to figure it out, or I can deepen my knowledge and my awareness and then gain more wisdom. And then I can, it's like puts you on the fast track. So that way you can just get a lot more out of life.
It does. And, so there's two, so the ancient yogic traditions or Eastern mysticism will say the most profound and effective way to grow, to learn, to expand, to reach high levels and states of consciousness is through direct experience. And which is existential experience. Yeah. And the reality is, at some point, not at some point, at every point, direct experience is inevitable. Because you can fast track your learning by being with someone, but you have to put into practice yourself. So the sages of the past, the swamis of the past, the gurus of the past, they would sit with a master, they would sit with a teacher for months, years, decades on end. But what they were teaching, what was being imparted, they would then practice. Where so many of us go wrong, and it's not wrong, but so many of us are led astray from that wisdom of learning from others and growing from others, as opposed to having to do all ourselves. And that's a byproduct of our society to some extent, our unconscious and conscious social norms, societal norms, and what society expects of us as individuals, and how social constructs evolve in the Western world and potentially in the Eastern world as well, is that we want to do everything ourselves, and we become so overwhelmed with the burden of that we don't end up taking action, meaningful action, to actually assimilate the wisdom. So the direct experience doesn't really take place in a meaningful and fruitful manner. And I feel our journeys have somewhat been similar, where you had that revelation. I also had that because I was also like, I misunderstood, 15 years ago, I misunderstood what the great Eastern mystics were saying about direct experience. I thought, I've got to do it all on my own. I've got to learn myself. But I might be here for lifetimes doing that. So why not learn from others, grow from others, absorb that, practice it, and you fast track. It's not even about fast tracking. It's about efficiency. And it's about being the grandest, most profound version of self by being present in that moment. And to do that, if we allow others, because we are relational beings, we're social beings, if we allow others to be of service to us and we open to that, then we can take that wisdom, that knowledge, turn it into wisdom and be of service to others, and the cycle continues. That's
absolutely
beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, pardon me. You had mentioned something earlier before we got onto the call. It was something about the 9 areas of life model. Yep. What is that?
Yeah. So most coaches, authors, speakers, people of service in this space will have like an areas of life. Excuse me. We'll have like an areas of life that they are able to lean upon to begin to categorize or compartmentalize life so it becomes digestible. Excuse me. And in doing so, it allows us as individuals to grow together. So the 9 areas of life that I have are as follows. There's the 4 bodies of the human sphere: the physical, the emotional, the psychological, and the spiritual. And then there's the 5. I mean, I call them the 5 extrinsic, which really lead to an internal state of assimilation, awareness, and being. Anyway, 5 extrinsic areas of life, and in no particular order. So there's social. Now, social includes our peer groups. It includes society. It includes culture and politics and so forth. It also includes the way we move through the world. So adventure and travel and the way we function globally, because we're such a globally connected society. Then we've got family, and family includes our immediate family relationships, so our relationships to our primary caregivers, and then blood relatives, but also our primary relatives as well. They may not be related to by blood. That's fine, of course. Then we've got our vocation, and our vocation is about our purpose. It's also inclusive of career. It's our vision for self, our mission, and so forth. So why are we here on Earth? Then we've got the financial area of life, and that's a fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, that is an integral area of life, and that drives, economy and socioeconomics drives our collective and individual behavior. It's a massive area of life. So how we relate to that, how we connect to that, how we interact with that area of life, our beliefs around each area of life will influence the way we live our lives and our sense of self, our sense of identity, and our sense of well-being. And then finally, there's the section or the area of life of relationships. And that comes down to 4 primary relationships: our relationship to ourself, our relationship to our intimate romantic partner, our beloved per se. 5 key areas. 4 key areas. I was thinking something else. My apologies. Our relationship to Earth, and our relationship to all things, or just all other things. So when I say Earth, I'm talking about natural ecology, our Earth as a living, breathing organism. And then when I'm saying all other things, I speak to literally anything and everything. So our relationship to material things in our environment, to our physical landscape. And I will mention this. So the 5th that I was mentioning is actually under the category of, or the life area of spirituality or spiritual. And that is our relationship to a higher consciousness, our relationship to God, our relationship to, if that is a belief system that you hold, our relationship, that's part of spirituality, our relationship to a divine being or a greater presence than our own, or a relationship to the ethereal, the immaterial, as opposed to only the material. So they're the 9 areas of life that I have, in short.
In short.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual for the intrinsic areas, and then there's extrinsic areas of social, family, vocation, financial, and relationships.
Yeah, and they're all, ultimately they're all intrinsic, and ultimately they're all about relationships. It's all about how we relate to each area of life.
It is. Yes. Yeah, essentially, basically. So when it comes to relationship alchemy, where is it that where would you say that people end up getting that wouldn't really make any sense, that question, because it's going to be different for everyone. I was going to say, where do people mostly get stuck when it comes to attracting into their lives the kind of relationship that they want? Because I guess that is relationship alchemy, is kind of attracting into their lives the relationship that they want, right?
Creating and attracting and gaining clarity in their lives so they can then take meaningful action with regard to that clarity.
Okay, so it's also about getting clarity so that way you can attract it.
Oh, hugely. So when we're talking about vocation, we're talking about really like getting clear on our purpose or purposes here in life. What drives us? What are our values? What are our hierarchy of values? What is most important to us in life? And what are the types of experiences we wish to live through? What are the types of experiences we wish to have in life? Who do we wish to be? for ourselves, for others, for the world? How do we wish to behave? So gaining clarity in that area allows us to then, we have this clarity, we'll have this clarity just here, sort of looming above our heads. And then we pull down the essence of that clarity or that purpose that while we are here. And we align our everyday actions with that purpose or with that reasoning, with that clarity. And then autonomically, we begin to cultivate and develop meaning and fulfillment in our lives, because our actions are actually aligned with something that matters to us, with something that's of importance, with something that we can resonate and relate to with depth and joy and excitement. And meaning and fulfillment essentially lay the foundations for happiness, for existential happiness. For me, that's my formula for happiness. Get clear on your purpose, act in accordance with your purpose. As a byproduct, you'll develop meaning and fulfillment, and that automatically lends itself to happiness. Full stop.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to generate the kind of relationship or life that you want if you're not clear on if there isn't any clarity on what that means for you, and I guess where you're going as well. I mean, you can be really clear about who you are, but where is it exactly that you're going?
Yeah. And see, and the beauty of all this is that this state of awareness places us in an open, and it's ongoing, right? It's perpetual. This places us in an ongoing state of being. It places us in a state of openness. So when we're in a state of openness, we're more receptive to the world around us. We're more receptive to new ideas. We become creative. We operate less from fear and more from courage and enthusiasm and excitement for life. As opposed to being in a closed state of being where we are coming from conscious and unconscious fears, we are retracted in life, we are constricted, we are not open to new things, new ideas, new people, new ways of being. We literally come from a place of doubt and confusion. Now you can imagine if you're living in that internally, if you're living in that space, how are your relationships affected? How are you affected? How's your sense of self-worth, your sense of well-being, your value, your self-esteem? It's debilitated. It's shot. So clarity is so important for every area of our life. Like if you're moving through life in doubt and confusion, you're not motivated, you're not inspired by life, you're not ecstatic about life, you cannot see what is working in life, you struggle to be in gratitude. How's that going to affect your physical health? It's easier to eat a high calorie, dense calorie burger, like a fast food option, because it's satisfying your fear senses. Yeah, it's easy, it's convenient, it's less thinking, it's less energy, because you've got so much energy, dense energy going towards surviving instead of thriving. So your health then becomes affected. How does our physical health and our nutrition, our sustenance, the way we sustain ourselves, how does that affect our emotional well-being and our emotional intelligence and our emotional acuity, our emotional literacy and our emotional fitness? How does that affect the way we become empathetic or compassionate? We don't even have that for ourselves. Are we going to have that for others? We're stuck in a mode of survival. How does that affect then our spirituality or our ability to contemplate higher order things?
Okay, well now I'm going to ask you how you dealt with this, because I'll be honest that the first now that I'm out of it, I can say this, but the first year that I was doing this, I was just slipping into the hardest financial year of my life, which actually is a large reason why I stopped doing any coaching, because I don't like to do any kind of coaching unless I've got my shit handled. So now that I finally got my shit handled, now is the time that I'm actually starting to reopen my door to coaching again. Before I was just doing it just from referrals, and I was coaching a bit, but it was predominantly through referrals. And I know what it is that I had to do to get myself out of that, because you're talking because I wasn't eating healthy, I wasn't exercising, I was going through a lot of financial struggle. It was just a lot of chaos. For me, unfortunately. So, and fortunately. I mean, both unfortunate and fortunate. And I knew that at the time, too. I was like, man, this really fucking sucks. I fucking hate this, but I know it's helping me. God, I get it. Can this be done yet? Jesus. So how have you gotten yourself out of those places? Because I think a lot of us really want to attract in these relationships into our life, and it is easier to, God, how can I structure this question? I guess I'm coming from the place of I'm curious how you handled it in the past. And I'm assuming that you've gone through struggle in the past, which is why I'm asking this question.
Immense.
Yeah. So how did you, get a hold of your health, and then okay, you know what? Here, I'm going to restructure it this way.
Yep.
When we're going through shit, we can spiral downwards, and it can be really, really, really hard to pull ourselves out of it. And it's when we pull ourselves out of it that we can, we have that alchemy where we can start to bring in better things, better relationships, and relate better with life, which then spirals upwards. It helps. It becomes exponential. So how did you get yourself out of that downward spiral when you were in there and when you were in the shit? I know what it is that I did, but this isn't about me. This is about you. So I'm really curious about what it is that you did.
Sure. So upon deeper reflection, and when I looked at what action I took and what states of self I immersed myself in, it was a cycle. It was a repetitive cycle that took place, which was really, really interesting in this repetitive cycle. And for me, the repetitive cycle was this repetitive cycle was about understanding self. This repetitive cycle was about connecting to self and creating space, like allowing space for self to be able to deal with the pain that was arising, that was coming up. Yeah, that was so important for me in that space. So, and I essentially cultivated a six-step process. And it's funny because I'm going to do a free live webinar on this actually in the next, I think on the 7th of March. I've got to talk to my design guy, my web guy, my digital strategist. But yeah, it's a really, really important, powerful frame, I believe. And this is what I moved into this space. So for most of us, relationships become a tremendous catalyst for growth. That was my experience as well. And when I say they become a catalyst for growth, they become a catalyst for growth for looking deep within who we are, for becoming deeply introspective. So for me, it was a 6-stage process for healing and transformation. So I would essentially go into depth. So I would go into the depth of what I was experiencing. I would go into the depth of whatever the pain was, and I would be there. I would stay there. Now, many people would do that in a very different way. How I approach depth and how you approach depth could be very different. For me, it was sitting in stillness and in silence. For me, it was creating space for myself in that sense. For me, it was thinking and feeling into what was going on. It was allowing myself to be emotionally expressive, but I was spending a lot of time in solitude, a lot of time in my own silence and stillness for me, and being with what was arising consciously to the surface of my consciousness. Now, that can become very overwhelming. So deeply overwhelming, to the point where it becomes, your self-preservation is challenged. Like you literally feel like killing yourself. Like you literally feel like committing suicide. You feel like ending the physical pain, the emotional pain, the spiritual pain. And most people that traverse the shadow self and traverse depth will experience that. And it's actually quite normal because it's so overwhelming and so new. And we're told like it's hypocrisy and it's taboo in our society. But the reality is that if you go at depth, if you traverse depth of being, you're going to experience immense pain. And as a byproduct of that, you're going to contemplate even if it's briefly. I never wanted to kill myself, so, and clearly because I'm still here. But it's something that, and I consider myself a rational, logical person. It's something that you actually consider from a logical place, and that almost sounds like a paradox and an oxymoron. How can you consider suicide if it's if you're a logical person? Well, if your hand is on a fire, right, and it's burning, you think about retracting your hand from that environment. Well, it's a similar notion. You're in physically so much pain, you feel like retracting yourself from this life.
Yeah, I think there's also a spiritual component there as well. If you are
There
a
is.
spiritual person, or
There's
believe that
surrendering.
well, I'm imagining, pardon me. I had this thought a while ago, and then I heard that there's actually a spiritual component. I don't quite remember the details of it, but basically the thought that I had was, well, you know what? I mean, and same thing, I didn't actually consider killing myself, but I did think to myself, why don't I just kill myself? Like, why does, I mean, ultimately, if I'm a spiritual being, I'm not actually dying. I'm just getting rid of these circumstances that I'm currently in because it is extremely difficult. I'm not dying in a lot. I'm just changing the form of life that I'm in. I'm like, because I'm spirit. I'm spirit. So, and ultimately, it doesn't really matter. And I don't mean that in a nihilistic sense. I guess maybe because I do believe that there is meaning to life and meaning to my life, but in the grand scheme of things, it also doesn't. It also doesn't really matter. I guess I'm kind of caught in the two there. So I thought, well, why not just kill myself?
What's important?
But I wasn't. I didn't actually contemplate it. I never contemplated it, but I did sit with that thought on a few occasions. So I do understand where you're coming.
It's healthy. Yeah. It's healthy because you're exploring an aspect of self that is legitimate and it's real. Like you're really thinking about it. So why ignore it? Why not be with those feelings? Mm-hmm. So, and there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. So depth is an important. So the first step to moving through trauma or moving through pain or healing and transitioning to a point of greater connection to self and awareness of self and love and so forth is our ability to go deep within self, to really go deep. Once you can't go, and remember this is a cycle, so this 6-step cycle is very it's repetitive, and you could repeat the cycle within like an hour. You could repeat the cycle within a day. You could repeat the cycle within 6 days or 7 days or 2 weeks. You go through the process and the stage, and when that stage comes to some form of temporary finality, you then move on to the next stage, and then you rinse and repeat. And what that allows you to do, it allows you to find reprieve and allows you to find, create an opportunity for, well, let me get to the next stage. So the next stage is grounding.
Right before you do that, I just want to make sure that I touch on the suicide thing as well, that if anyone is considering suicide, please reach out to someone because you really do matter. I mean, I was talking from a philosophical perspective, and yes, also spiritual, but you know, I've found that the most amount of meaning that I've gotten out of life is having gone through some of the hardest points of my life, even though I did have those thoughts, even though I didn't contemplate it, they've been the most rewarding. So I am actually curious, before you move on to the next step there, what is it that you did when you were having those thoughts of removing your hand from the fire of life? What is it that gave you the meaning to not get rid of this body of yours?
Gratitude, essentially, and appreciation. And suicide is not anything to be taken lightly. And or the contemplation of ending one's life is not anything to be taken lightly. And there are various contexts in which we can discuss it. We can discuss it philosophically, conceptually. We can discuss it in a form of being emotionally distant. We can discuss it from a perspective of pathology. We can discuss it from a perspective of self-worth and self-identity. But essentially what I did was go deep within self and really realize, well, what is my worth? Why am I here? What matters to me in life? What can I be appreciative for just right now, even if it's maybe just the blue sky? So it's really focusing on those aspects of life and your own self as well. And when we're able to do that, we are granted a new perspective. We don't view life in a polarized manner. We don't view life in a way that is abstract or just one-sided. We're able to view life and observe and feel the contrast in life and say, okay, well, there is worthiness here, there is value here. Let me focus on the value. And this six stage process allows us to do that. It really does. It's a very powerful tool. It's a framework and a tool with a great deal of flexibility for the individual to be able to express themselves subjectively how they wish to. Which is important. Amazing. Because we have to feel empowered in our actions.
Yeah, absolutely. We do. I mean, no one wants to feel powerless. So if we're going to take action,
Yeah. And I, in order to elaborate on your question, I also felt I made it not just only about me. So I observed, what about the people in my life that matter, not so much to me, but that I matter to them? And how would they feel if I was no longer here in such an abrupt, harsh way, perceived to be harsh way? And then I also thought, what about my future self? What about my future potential? What about the potential that I hold within myself and my service to humanity and my service to Earth and the value that I bring? And how would that impact possibly the world? Because we all carry value. We all carry intrinsic worth, such depth of worth and value. And how would that then change the dynamic of this reality? And do I really want to, is that the legacy I wish to leave behind? Is that real deep, truthful contribution? So those are the questions I'm asking myself. And this is why it's so important to cultivate healthy habits. When you have healthy habits, you're able to lean on those healthy habits in times of disarray or in times of confusion or in times of immense pain.
In times of chaos.
In times of chaos. When you don't have healthy habits and tools and exercises to lean on and healthy coping strategies, you're unable to lean on any of that, and you suffer even. It's not that you suffer more or less, it's that you just perpetually suffer. You continue to suffer with no way out, hence why people end their lives, because they see no way out. They have this polarized view of reality that the only way out, or the only way to move through this deep pain and fear and everything that I'm experiencing that I just don't want to, is to physically end consciousness. And the only way I know how to do that is to stop the incessant thinking and feeling, is to end my life physically.
Mm-hmm. I guess that kind of is a suicide. So when people are constantly getting drunk or doing drugs, in a lot of ways, it is a form of spiritual suicide.
Yeah, emotional suicide, relational suicide. Yeah, because they don't have the courage to physically end their life, or because they don't have, because maybe that's not something they wish to do. So we ignore and we suppress and we distract ourselves.
Yeah, it's true. I've never I've always looked at sort of it's alcohol, even though I do drink. I've never actually really considered it as a form of spiritual suicide until just now, just from that conversation. But when I did drink a lot, it definitely was a form of suicide because I did
because you're
not want to.
forgetting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
In
absolutely.
my younger days, I didn't revert. I didn't lean on alcohol or drugs. I leaned on exercise. Like I would, when I, 10 plus years ago, when I was in a lot of pain for whatever I was experiencing at that time, rather than dealing with my pain, which I would do, but I wouldn't really go at depth. I wouldn't traverse depth, like in order to actually equilibrate and neutralize this and learn and grow from it. I'd finish work at 8, 9 p.m. in the evening, and I'd just jump on my bike and I would cycle for like 3, 4, 5 hours until the early hours of the morning. And so I'd be so exhausted that I wouldn't have an opportunity to think about
Mm.
my pain, you know? And that was my coping strategy. Healthier than some, but still, it was an extreme expression, so not necessarily healthy because I was still in a state of avoidance, still in a state of ignorance and wanting to forget. People would say, why do you exercise so much? I'd say, like to those that were close to me, I'd say I trained to forget. I moved to forget. I'd bust myself up at high intensity to forget the pain. So that's not healthy either because, we're in a state of avoidance. We're disconnected from self.
Hmm. Yeah, that is very, very true.
It's given me wonderful tools though. Like through that I've cultivated emotional resilience and toughness and spiritual resilience and toughness and mental resilience and toughness and a myriad of other immense benefits. But it's still an extreme expression, and extreme expressions aren't healthy.
So I guess I've got a last question here for you, and then
Yeah,
I've got to get out of here, and I'm sure you
yeah,
got to
yeah,
get
of
out of here
course.
too. When you started to dive into the pain and you stopped distracting yourself from it, how did you make sure that you could handle the pain? Because, for example, if I reach outside of my comfort zone and I reach too far and I get hurt, my comfort zone actually retracts because I went too far. But if you like just push your comfort zone just a tiny bit, tiny bit, tiny bit, tiny bit, and then eventually your comfort zone is huge. So in the same thing with pain, like if I experience just a tiny bit of pain, I heal it a little bit, little bit, little bit. Then your capacity to go deep, well, it's you've gradually gone deeper and deeper and deeper. So how did you handle your pain in a way where you didn't collapse in the face of it?
Yeah. So I would refer back to that six-step process, that six-stage process that I engaged in, which so in neuroscience it's called titration and pendulation, where we're able to slowly expose ourselves to a difficult situation, learn from it, come back to it, grow again, reshape, remap our neuronal pathways, and so forth. So for me, after I traversed depth, I would ground. I would ground myself. So whether that meant eating, whether that meant being in nature, whether that meant drinking water, even there's simple grounding techniques and tools, and some of it was meditation, but no, not deep esoteric like this type of meditation, but more grounding meditation, being in nature, eating food, simple things, sleeping, grounding. Yeah, so that would be the next step for me. After that, I would want to release, because through the grounding and through the depth, a lot of stuff comes up, and we want to try and remember it all, and we want to be with it, and that's not necessarily healthy. So we want to reflect, and we want to journal. In other words, we want to get it out of our heads. So we want to write it down or type it out. Preferably writing it out is good because of the brain integration, bottom up, top down,
It's
left
much
and right,
better.
that takes place.
It's
Yeah.
much better than typing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and the perspective then that we gain on that, so we can sort of set it and forget it. We don't have to keep thinking about and reliving these experiences. We've written it down, we've given it perspective, we've attached them. Like there's more of a process to this, but because of time, I'm going to go very simple here.
Sure.
So then I go through that process of downloading, so to speak, yeah. And in that process of downloading, we also release. We're releasing, and when we release, we create space for more wisdom and perspective to enter from the depth that we've traversed in step one. Then we rest. So the fourth step is resting, self-love practices. Resting could be, again, sleeping, laying down, taking a break from habit, from routine, being kind to self-compassionate exercises, whatever it may be, varies for everybody. Okay. For me, it was spending time in the ocean. For me, it was not being harsh on myself. For me, it was working a little bit less, a lot less actually. And it wasn't so much being of service to others. I had to give to myself more. So it was being of service to me. So I kept my home in order, internal and external. I'd watch a movie if I wanted to watch a movie. I'd just lay down and listen to music. I was just cool, just easy on self. Yeah. For me, that was the fourth step. And then I would move into introspection and solitude. And a big part of that was gratitude. So, and this can be done obviously while you're resting, but then be introspective about life. Just being in solitude, or literally being on my own, was very, very important. And that was also intrinsically tied into step one. But being introspective and specifically speaking to gratitude, specifically thinking and feeling into what I was grateful for in my life, deep appreciation for life. And then the final step of that, the sixth step, is actually being social. Surrounding yourself with people that you respect, that you trust, and that you revere, and where that's reciprocated, whether that be friends, whether that be a professional, whether that be someone that's taking you through this journey in some part, whether you have a mentor or a coach or whatever it may be, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a counselor, whatever that may be, but even having friends, family, people that you can surround yourself with that give you joy and make you happy. Creating lightness in your life is so important. Creating happiness in your life as one of those stages is so important. Then once you feel elevated, it's not ignoring, because remember, you're not ignoring or distracting yourself or avoiding, because you have an intention to go deep again. Once you then feel empowered and you feel strong, go deep again and repeat. And for me,
amazing.
that's sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a phenomenal 6-step process, man.
Thank you.
Absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much. I mean, this conversation just kept on getting better and better and better and better and better and better and better, man. Yeah, this was an epic conversation. How is it that people can reach you, Stef?
Yeah, look, I mean, you can reach me on social media, of course. So Stef Sifandos on social media, Instagram, Facebook, etc. My website, stefsifandos.com, stefsifandos.com. And yeah, everything's I'm very accessible through those means, of course.
Yeah, you're very accessible is the perfect word. Accessible.
Yeah. Everything I do is public. So and I do that on purpose. It's it really allows me to be focused on my service and the quality of my service, but also just allows us all to be accessible in a day and age where we already are anyway, so we may as well just embrace it.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Man, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Thank you for your time. I deeply appreciate it and honored to be here. Really honored. Thank you, my friend.